Hello, my fellow Inklings. We'll welcome you back to the Eagle and Child. I want to start today with a question that might sound strange coming from a Christian post. So what are you trying to prove? Because here's what I noticed in myself, and maybe you too recognize it. There is a quiet, persistent belief that the Christian life is fundamentally about becoming a better, more disciplined, more spiritually impressive version of myself. If I just pray more, serve more, believe more correctly, I'll finally arrive somewhere. Finally be enough. But if Christ is already in us, what exactly are we trying to prove? That question is at the heart of everything we're going to talk about today. In part 3, we explored the idea that Christ is not just an historical figure to be believed in, but the Logos, the divine pattern woven into the entire fabric of all creation. And Paul tells us that the same pattern, the same Christ lives within every human being in all things. He calls it the mystery, Christ in you, the hope of glory. C.S. Lewis took that seriously enough to say that the whole purpose of the Christian life is to become little Christ, not to achieve moral perfection or spiritual perfection, not to win some private moral competition, but to be so transformed from within that the pattern of the Christ, demonstrated by Jesus, his self-giving love, his surrender, his way of dying so that something truer can live, begins to take shape in us. And here's the key thing Lewis is saying. The goal is not a perfected individual self. The goal is participation in a shared life. The Christian life was never a solo project, which is why on the night before he died, when Jesus could have prayed for anything, he did not pray for our individual moral improvement. He prayed for union, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. That's from John 17:21. Divine union, not individual perfection, is the goal of Christianity. It always was. Most of us grew up hearing the word atonement as a legal term, a debt, a payment, a courtroom transaction. But here is something most people do not know. That is not the word originally what it meant in the early Christians. The word atonement is literally at-ONE-ment. Used as early as the 1300s, it meant to be made one, to be reconciled, to be brought back together. The original word was always about reunion, especially the unity of God and humanity. That transactional framework of atonement, the debt, the payment, the courtroom scene, that came later. The original word points to a fracture being healed. The reunion of what was never meant to be separated. At-ONE-ment is what happens when the Christ in you recognizes the Christ in me. We become at one. And something larger than either of us comes to life between us. So why doesn't it feel that way? If union is the deepest truth, why does everything feel so fractured and split between people, between groups, even within our own hearts? The medieval Christian teacher, Meister Eckhart, spent much of his life writing about what he called detachment. Not detachment from the world, but detachment from the ego's insistence on running everything. He understood that as long as the ego is in charge, the deeper self, what Thomas Merton called our truest identity in God, cannot fully emerge. The ego, by its very nature, is a machine for generating separateness. It is organized around control and superiority. It does not simply experience the self as distinct. It experiences the self as separate, and that separateness as something to be defended. There are 4 ways we habitually live from this separate self rather than from the Christ within. I want to walk through them briefly because I think most of us will recognize ourselves in at least one. The first is the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have pushed down, denied, or refused to look at. It's our blind spots, our wounds, our fears, our capacity for harm. Carl Jung taught that what we refuse to face in ourselves does not disappear. It controls us from underneath, and it comes out sideways in judgment, in projection, in the quiet certainty that the problem is always somewhere else or is someone else. Jesus said to remove the log from our own eye before attending to the speck in our neighbor's eye. This is what confession is for. This is what the inner work of spiritual transformation requires. And here's the painful irony. The pursuit of individual perfection actually makes shadow work harder. When the goal is to appear spiritually impressive, we have every incentive to hide the parts of ourselves that are not. But union requires honesty. We cannot offer to others what we have not first been willing to face in ourselves. The second split is the tyranny of our own thoughts. Descartes gave us the line, "I think, therefore I am." It may be one of the costliest ideas in Western history because our anxious thoughts are relentless and repetitive and unkind. They are not the same thing as the Christ within us. Most of us have been formed into thinking dualistically, dividing everything into pairs, good and bad, saved and unsaved, us, them. Like a well-worn trail in the woods, the mind runs down the same path again and again, often called the neural pathways. They're useful for survival, giving us quick reaction to danger. But the division rarely leads to compassion, wisdom, or love. Paul says to be transformed by the renewal of your mind. He also tells us to take every thought captive. But most of the time, it feels like our thoughts have us captive. Contemplative prayer and mindfulness practice exist exactly and precisely for this, to create enough interior silence that we stop confusing ourselves with our thoughts altogether, to discover beneath the noise what Paul calls the mind of Christ and what Jesus calls the kingdom of God within you. We're not our thoughts. We have thoughts, and learn to hold them loosely may be one of the most important spiritual practices available to us. On the homepage of my website at recoverchristianity.org, I share some of the practices that I use, influenced by Thomas Keating. Feel free to take a look at them. Again, it's a link off the main homepage of Recover Christianity. The third split is our refusal to embrace death. We run from discomfort, from loss, from anything that asks something to die in us. We want the resurrection without the Friday. We want transformation without the suffering that makes it possible. And we want spiritual growth without dying to self, which is perhaps where the pursuit of individual perfection is most seductive. It promises transformation while keeping the ego, the separate self, intact. But the Paschal mystery does not offer that trade. As Jesus said, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. I want to tell you something personal here, something that's still unfolding in my life right now. After 30 years of living in Colorado, building a life, a community, friendships, influence, a whole world of the known, I felt something in my spirit calling me to leave, to move back to my hometown of Durham, North Carolina. My youngest son, Dylan is going to Duke University here, which made the move feel a little more natural. But the deeper pull was something else, a sense that I needed to detach from the known, to loosen my grip on the comfortable and the familiar, and to step into something I could not fully see. Leaving has been harder than I expected, not just logistically, but spiritually. You do not realize how much of your identity is built around your community, your place, your influence, until you walk away from it. And the loneliness that comes in that in-between space, after you have left one thing and before a new thing has arrived, is real. It is the grain of wheat in the ground. I do not know exactly what God is up to. I do not have a tidy resolution to offer you. But I've learned this. Sometimes the most important spiritual acts are physical ones. Sometimes detachment requires actually detaching. And the willingness to enter the unknown, to let something in us die so that something truer can emerge, is not a sign of losing faith. It's the pattern. It's the way of the cross. And I'm trying to trust it. Paul knew this from the inside. I've been crucified with Christ and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The ego, and I have a big one, with all of its need to control and protect and to hold on to the known, must give away. And in its place, something comes to life that we could not have generated on our own. The fourth split is perhaps the deepest and most damaging. We have been formed to see ourselves as not only separate, but superior. We draw lines, form tribes, and protect our own, convinced we are simply being faithful or realistic. And when that separateness becomes unbearable, we find someone to blame. It's a scapegoat. We explored scapegoating in earlier posts. It is the deeply human mechanism of projecting our own darkness onto others and feeling temporarily righteous about it. Instead of becoming little Christ, as Lewis envisioned, when we scapegoat others, we become something else entirely. We become what the word Satan actually means, the accuser. So instead of becoming little Christ, we can become little Satans. But John 1 will not allow us to rest in that illusion. If the Logos is the pattern through which all things were made, if Christ is in every human being, then there is no one outside the circle. God created mankind in his own image. There is no race, no culture, no nation, no person who does not carry that divine image. Unity is not uniformity. Paul describes the body of Christ as radically different parts, each essential, none interchangeable, held together not by sameness, but by belonging to the same life, the same body. I cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. We already belong to each other because the same Christ is in all of us, holding all things together. Into all four of these splits, Jesus steps, not to condemn us for them, but to expose them and heal them. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. On the cross, he becomes the ultimate scapegoat, falsely accused, abandoned, executed by systems convinced of their own righteousness. He absorbs the full weight of human violence, fear, and exclusion. And then he refuses to send it back. He refuses to scapegoat. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. The shadow is absorbed rather than projected. The noise of accusation is met with silence and surrender. Death is embraced. Not my will, but yours. And his final words, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. The illusion of separateness is shattered by forgiveness offered freely to enemies. This is not God demanding payment. This is God absorbing violence and returning only love. Entering fully into every false self, every split, every illusion of separation, and refusing to be defined by any of it. Love going all the way to the darkest place and not turning away. If atonement is really at-ONE-ment, then everything that divides us within ourselves, between each other and from God, is exactly what Jesus came to heal. And exactly what Jesus was praying on the night before he died, that we all become one, be united. So what are you holding on to tightly right now? What part of the known are you still clinging to? Not because it's still serving you, but because letting it go feels like dying. Maybe it's a relationship that needs to change, a version of yourself you have outgrown, a certainty that you've been defending, a grudge that has become part of your identity. Or maybe like me, it is more concrete, a place, a community, a chapter of life that is asking to be released. The invitation of Jesus is not to become a more impressive version of your current self. It is to lose that separate self altogether and find something truer on the other side. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. The pattern holds. Death is not the end. The grain of wheat goes into the ground and it does not stay there. Divine union, not individual perfection, that's the goal. And it is available to you right now in whatever you're facing, in whatever you're being asked to release. I hope to see you again soon at the Eagle and Child. Grace and peace.